A very good morning to all of you, and a happy Passover weekend, and a very happy Easter Sunday. It was chilly this morning, but it is a beautiful day out right now. We have with us the lovely and ever popular. I have had a few congregation members say that Donna is more liked than me, which I'm going to say stings a little bit, but we are happy to have her here. So, welcome, Donna. And Kim had some thoughts on the meaning of Easter and the service and wanted to ask some questions. So, go for it, Kim.
Well, I was listening to your service, and I may have to listen to it a couple of times because I thought I didn't hear that. So I didn't hear that correctly. All right. So I think you were trying to say that Jesus died on the cross for what reason? Because I thought you were saying he did not die on the cross to save us from our sins.
That is what I said, yes. What I said was that he chose to demonstrate who we truly are, and that, in this demonstration, he had to make it big or nobody would even notice it. And so it was a demonstration that through his actions, turning over the tables of the money changers, in the temple and all that, so he would get arrested. So that he would be arrested, and so he could make this demonstration, so that people could see that we're not just our bodies, that we are divine beings who we have another essence, another part of us that is spiritual. And so that is one belief about Easter. I know there are other beliefs, and this is just one that I was sharing with you this today, Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah, because I am of the belief that he died to save us from our sins. And how can you live without knowing that is my belief. So I was just making sure that's what I'm like, what?
Oh, yes, no. And I never mean to say you don't have your own beliefs and you have to believe this way, but it's another way of looking at things that I like to present. And I absolutely respect everybody's belief on what it means to you. And it's very personal. Actually, everything in life is very personal. And whatever works for you that helps you be a better person or feel better about yourself, I think is perfect. And so I was presenting my beliefs in this, certainly not as the only one.
Okay, that's good.
Well, and
yes,
and if anything, it points to the multidimensional aspect of these stories. It's that, it's kind of like a house of mirrors in a lot of ways, of what we get out of the stories, and what one of the great things about Christianity was this brand new notion that you had a personal relationship with God, as opposed to the communal relationship with God. So.
Yeah. And and in our history, we really are not sure what really happened.
Oh, of course. Of course.
And so that leaves it open for our interpretation and that avenue to take what you feel is true for you to help you live your life. And I just think that's wonderful, because there are many trails up the mountain, but we're all going up the mountain, So.
Right. May I interrupt a minute to ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Okay, I know that a belief in many of the traditional churches is the belief in original sin. And I've always felt that the crucifixion, the death of Christ, and the reference to sin is the reference to the idea of us all being born in sin. So, and of course, that's something well, not of course, but I don't believe that. But Donna, how would you address that?
Well, I don't believe in original sin. I believe that if we are truly divine creations, And I think, as I said in my talk, that most of the religions, I know not all of them, believe that God is love. I can't understand how love could create something that was not love and pure. And so I look at it as we're all divine creations and we are love. And when we decide to come into a lower vibration of the physical, that we tend to forget that. And in that fear, because we feel like we are separate from our source, just like I was saying about the child separate from its parents, we live in a lot of fear. And it's that fear that creates our, I call them mistakes in our living and with ourselves and with each other. Some people call them sins. I call them mistakes. And this whole journey here is to help us learn. And when we're learning, we make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes when they're learning, because that's just the whole thing. We're learning, we don't know it yet. And so we're making mistakes and learning. And I see it as a coming into the physical, learning, going back out. And some of us tend to do this several times. I don't know exactly why some people can come in, a few times, and others can come in over and over and over and over. But that's my understanding and all that I have read. But it's a choice that we make so that we can have these experiences, and the body is the vehicle for the experiences. And so it's not as if that we are something horrible that has come in here, we need to get punished. We come here to learn, and because we are at the effect of fear, we make these mistakes, and living in fear is what brings these little crucifixions, big crucifixions to us, but in this learning process. And that's an individual process, because every individual has come to learn whatever it is they're here to learn. And so there's no original sin. It's an experience that we're having because we chose it. That's my belief.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
and there's, I think there's a lot of religious strains of thought that would certainly agree with that. We talked about original sin last time, or 2 times ago. And my interpretation of original sin are those innate appetites that we have that are not necessarily healthy for us, right? So, like, it would be a beautiful world if we only ever lusted after the person that we were married to, right? But that's not the way our human bodies work. And so that's what I think of as original sin, is this idea. It's an appetite that's innately built into the human body. And I think it's an important distinction that we should make, that the word sin comes from the Greek word meaning to miss the mark.
Yes.
So it is very much like a mistake, right? Like you aimed here, but you didn't. The arrow didn't strike where you meant it to. So, Lurley,
and that's where you have the freedom to make a different choice.
Yeah. Okay. So we got a lot of people wanting to get in. Lurley had her hand up first, and then it looks like Laline and JC, and then Julianne. Did you have your hand up?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. I'll put it down. Go for it, Lurley.
Okay, thank you. I was raised Presbyterian, and I struggled with myself during my growing years, because number one, they talked about the original sin, but secondly, that Christ had died in a cruel way for my sins.
Mm-hmm.
And as a child, I didn't choose for him to do that. I didn't ask him to do that. I don't want to be responsible for his crucifixion. And this was as a child. As time's gone on, I still don't understand why they call it Good Friday, because it was when he was arrested.
Right.
Anyway, as far as original sin goes, I can't buy that either. I do believe genetically that some of us are predisposed to certain things, whether it be super intelligence or whether it be um, physical desires, whatever. You know, but I have so appreciated Donna in your talk. It helped ease my conscience.
Thanks, Lurley. Yeah, I remember going into churches and I just didn't feel good. I didn't make it, nothing made sense to me. And this is just as a child.
Right.
And that's why I never did go back to church when I had a choice and, you know, got older. To go into Unity was the first church I ever actually got really involved in. And because I really appreciated their principles because they were pure, they were hopeful, they were, you know, give you something to, I guess, really build your life on in a happy way. You know?
And relate to.
Yes, and you can relate to it. Yeah.
Well, so we'll have Laleen go next.
I was listening today, Don, kind of with a mixture of child's ears and adult, you know, stuff. And I was taken back to why divine and love really, truly are the essence of us. And it started with me remembering being like 8 or 9 years old and looking for a religion. And I went to a bunch of churches and I asked 2 questions. One question was, well, if you never heard about Jesus or God and you lived in deepest, darkest Africa, does that mean you're going to go to hell? That was question number 1.
Yeah.
And number 2 is, if I don't really believe that God had a son, does that mean that I can't be, you know, Catholic or whatever the church was? And I never got a satisfactory answer. Yeah. So the next attempt was after I was out as a lesbian, and you all know what that means. You know, you're sinful, you're sick, you know, mentally, and I mean all those old kinds of beliefs that everyone had. And so one day, very early on in the gay liberation movement, I was sitting with Troy Perry, and he said, you know, Elaine, God doesn't make junk. And my little kid heard that. God doesn't make junk.
Yeah.
And then the next thing that happened was like 30 years later, hadn't been into church, you know, but I walked into the Center for Spiritual Living one day, and the song they were singing was This Little Light of Mine. And there is my 7, 8-year-old little child just crying these huge tears, remembering each of those points where I learned something so pivotal about the origin of me and who I really am and who loves me and who doesn't love me and whether there's this heaven or it all poured out with this huge relief of it's not a question anymore. Yeah. And then I met Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she told me something amazing about developmental stages that explained Jesus. And she said that when you're first born, the first stage of development is really emotional, that a child responds to their environment and they learn those basic, you know, cry, I'm hungry, smile, and, you know, get smiled back. The next stage is physical. It's a huge period of major, major growth. And then the third stage is cognitive and intellectual. And as you get a little older, it becomes spiritual. And those can overlap and extend in any way, but when you die, you are your almost entirely spiritual self. And that was Jesus. Totally in his spiritual, divine consciousness during the whole period of the crucifixion. And that's how, if one isn't afraid of dying or fearful of all the sins or things they might have committed, that's how you die. You die in love.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden I went, okay, thank you. So thank you again, Donna, for reminding me of all of that. It's so soothing.
Thank you, Lillian. Yes.
Yeah, beautiful. JC.
Well, this is a childhood house today
Yay!
because of other things that I have been doing this week and last in my shamanic training. The last week has been committing myself to actually knowing that I have a truth cord. And for me, I realized listening to you and all that I've listened to today, that my truth cord, I stepped away from when I was 12. When I realized, but didn't have the words for it, that original son is, oh, I had the word, unessential, not even important, doesn't count, because God doesn't make junk. So the fact is, sometimes you don't live up to it, but what I saw was in my Episcopal church was the church taking the easy way of seeing human power being legislated by Jesus and God and those beliefs. And if you had those beliefs, you had power. Yeah. And these are not 13-year-old thoughts. I didn't understand them until today at 85. It's a good thing to live a long time and keep this spiritual thing going, because eventually you grow into it. But so what I see and understand today is, now let's see, I have it written down here. I'm going to try and say it without reading it. That with the truth that I heard from Donna today, that my power is to live as Jesus taught us to live. And then I am developing the power. I'm not making up for any supposed lack of being important. If I'm honoring my divinity, then my power is available to me. That's what I learned today. I didn't have to believe to get power. I carry the power. And my 13-year-old is thinking, thank God she got around to this. I've been really hoping she was going to take this off my hands so she could realize she's a powerful person without believing in original sin. So that's where I stand. And my truth cord today is saying, what I heard from you today, Donna, is truth. It's my truth, and that's exactly what I believe and have all this time, but I haven't had the courage in the 50s to take on the spiritual wandering away from the path. So I have this kid, and when she said she wanted to go off on this path, I said, I'm right behind you. You go out there and be brave, and I'll be brave with you. And so, but I found out lately that I have to do this myself too.
Absolutely.
I have to be brave myself. So anyway, thank you, Donna. I've got it all written down, and I'm going to have your speech figured out on paper so I cannot forget it again.
Okay.
There you go.
It should have gone out already, I think. So great. Thank you. Thank you, JC.
Julianne.
The doctrine of original sin didn't exist until St. Augustine developed it. Jews do not believe in original sin. As a Jew, Jesus did not believe in original sin.
Irrelevant.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. That was interesting.
We can thank St. Augustine for a lot of interesting doctrinal points. So,
Right.
Yes, and there is a verse in Psalms. David said something about original sin. He was talking about his sin, and somehow that also contributed, I think, to that. Yeah,
that and the fall of Adam and Eve, and of course, Eve is a temptress. You know, religions have used Eve as temptress motif to cudgel, as a cudgel against women to this very day.
yes,
So
yes.
Yeah. But of course,
there is that aspect of the original sin doctrine.
Yes.
I am of the opinion that all doctrines could yield wisdom if viewed through the right prism.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes, I agree. And what that takes is very fundamental.
Mhm.
An open mind, a willingness to look beyond. And that is scary for a lot of
Yeah.
people. And that's
yeah.
why they get stuck. Oh, no, I don't want to move from here because I know this.
Yes.
Right.
But in order to learn and grow, you really do need to be courageous and walk out of the box and say, well, what's out here? And it's amazing what you learn and what you see, and your whole life changes because there's so much more. And, you know, but it's that fear factor again. You know, people, you know, there are women who will stay in relationships where, you know, they're being beaten and everything because they know that, and they're more afraid of something they don't know. And you know, that's sad. But I have found in my times when I've said, okay, let's go for it, you know, and just, you know, having butterflies and everything, it's always better for me. It's always better for me because it just gives me so much more to choose from and to help in my progress and my learning. So, but I understand the fear because the ego is fear, and it's a tough one. It's a tough one to let go of.
And
so,
Michael, I can't raise. You can't see me raise my hand. May I
Yes.
interrupt?
Yes, only to say that there are plenty of men who stay in abusive relationships too.
Yes.
Because of fear. Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to eliminate men.
No,
yes,
that's okay.
I've seen that myself.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. Go ahead, Carol.
Well, I'm interested in what Donna just said about fear, because I think fear is the one element that turns so many people to the church, any church. And I know at the age I am now, death is something that we have to deal with. You know, we have friends that are dying, and our years are numbered. I'm speaking of myself, of course. But fear for me, and I think this is very simplistic, as a child or as a young person, okay, my first fear was learning to drive a car. And then I looked around and I saw all of those people driving, and some people say, well, I'm certainly smarter than that person. If that person can learn to drive, surely I can. My next thing to think about a fear was childbirth. And the same reasoning, I look around and I'm very pregnant and I'm thinking, wow, that has to be the most natural thing in the world. Why should I fear childbirth? It's very natural. So why is there that to fear? I use that same philosophy now with death. And I think it's just as natural as childbirth So what is there to fear about death? And a lot of people, I think religion is what they turn to because of the fear of death. I don't fear death. I fear loneliness. I fear that I will be the one left alone, that my friends will be gone, my mate could be gone, and I would be left alone. That is the fear that I have, not the death, but that period before death that we all have to deal with. So now, there you go, Donna, another thing to think about.
Well, you know, I want to also say, you know, fear is an evolutionary driver. Okay, it's not bad to have fear. That's not what I'm saying at all. But fear is that kind of that moment, if you think about it, that you realize, you know, I don't like this feeling. Something has to change. That opens that up perhaps for you to think about, okay, what is this telling me? Why is this making me afraid? And then you can look within and find answers. So it's not that fear is bad or good. It is an experience, an emotion, and it can be very helpful in moving you forward and moving out of fear. I mean, I used to fear driving in Calgary in Alberta when I lived there, and I came here just like this until I realized I have nothing to fear driving here. There are no cars, you know. So it's just something that you evolve out of when you come and you just look it straight in the face, because normally when you look at something you're fearing, you realize, wow, that wasn't very big after all, you know, or it wasn't anything like I thought it was going to be. So yeah, like I say, fear is a big evolutionary driver. So never for anything really, I would like to say, don't put yourself down for having emotions, having fear. Those are all part of the process, and they're really precious to that process. What happens though is when we get stuck, and you know, that's the biggie that keeps a lot of people, you know, from growing and stuck in the fear.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd be afraid of childbirth too. I've never had a child, but I'd be afraid of it.
Me too.
Yeah. Michael, that would be something.
That would be some world records there.
Make some news.
Yeah, Glennis. Glennis wanted to get.
Well, I was only gonna say that I'm the mom of two. They were both large. I experienced fear of pain, you know, and that's what I experience when I'm looking at the possibility of dying. In my my instructions to myself is that I will pass in my sleep late in my 80s or early 90s or whatever. That's it, you know. And I don't fear the death itself. It's just what you have to go through to get there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And I've put my I guess, what do I want to say that? I've lost my word, but anyway, I've already told the universe how I want to die. I want to be going full bore, having fun, and just not wake up one morning.
Yep.
You know, that's
my plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
My request is what I was trying to think. That's my request.
I think the two greatest drivers of fear is fear of the unknown and fear of pain, and death kind of encapsulate both of those things. Yeah, well, let's see. I can call on people. Oh, what, Lalene's got something, and then I'll call on people.
Basically, we're born with only two emotions. That's love and fear, and everything else is an offshoot of that. If you really look at the hundreds of words that are used to describe emotion. And fear in that sense is really to help move us toward love. It's fear of falling, fear of not being alone, i.e. not being fed, not being comfortable, not having that experience of being loved and protected and taken care of. And then as we grow older, we get a lot more words for all of those feelings, but the intention was that you would come in divine love and you will exit in divine love if you have lived that life of consciousness that keeps you centered in your own consciousness in love. And I think that's why Elizabeth always stressed so much that that last stage of development, really was the spiritual. The thing I wanted to add to the current conversation is that we need to remember that our deaths now too often are not within our control unless we make the decision that they will be. And part of that, was what Donna just said about how she's putting out to the universe how she would like her death to be. But the other side of that is to be sure that you have made arrangements so that it is not the medical establishment that makes that determination. If you should fall and were left alone for a half an hour, you would die, but they grabbed you in the first 10 minutes or something and did all kinds of things to you, then your death might be a very different experience. So when we did that long thing at UU in AEO several years ago, people who stayed with that, one of the things that we talked about are the choices that you make about dying, what that's going to look like and how you write that down and have somebody to ensure that that's how it's going to be. And if we go back to days of old, when you got toward the end of your life, you just died because all of those interventions didn't happen. People stopped eating. Well, what's the easiest way to die now? You stop eating and you stop taking water, and within a week or two, your body will just shut down. And it's kind of like having the flu, and you pass on, but you pass on out of the spiritual quadrant consciousness, not out of a painful tubes in you, all kinds of things, consciousness.
Yeah, and I think advanced directives are very helpful that way. I know I have one because there are just some things I just don't want to have happen to me. And so that's another way of empowering yourself in your life, is because the world itself is probably not going to support you if it's different than what the world has established as normal right now, you see. So if you're outside of that, it's not going to support you unless you have something there to say, wait a minute, this is my life and here's how I want it to go. Yeah. So I think that's very important for your empowerment and to understand that you have that power,
And
it's just actually revisiting that when I decided what I was going to do now that I've retired from AEO. I was going to do special events. And I decided, I was reading through the materials and some new evolved material. We need to do another one of those series for all the people who didn't get in the last one and wish they had. And for all of those who are new or from other churches who want to join us in that process of living well until you die. So hold on to that. Living well until you die, it will recycle itself.
And I just have one suggestion. You always do it on Wednesdays, and I work on Wednesdays. If you would do it on Tuesday or Thursday, I could join you. So that was just my input there. So
yeah, and this is not just the realm of the elderly either. I am so grateful that my wife told me explicitly, you would never let me stay on machines. Right. You would tell them to pull the plug. I never thought I'd actually ever have to make that kind of a decision, but knowing what she wanted made it, well, I guess as easy as it could be,
Yes.
A blessing.
Yes.
A blessing to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
To know what a person wants and not have to be their decision maker because you don't know.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Because God knows it's hard enough. All right. Well, let's see. Who has not spoken yet? We've got Anne Claire, Martha, Sharon. Who? Anybody?
Joanne.
Joanne.
I wasn't going to talk about this, but I already have my paperwork done, and my children know about it. But last Thursday, my beloved cat Zippy was ill. And I stayed with her all night long, and finally we went to the doctors. I got them to know that she was coming. and it was decided that she would be put down.
Oh,
Could have had the opportunity, I could have, of bringing her home for a couple weeks a month, but she'd have to have injections twice a day. And so I let her go. But the reason I'm telling you this is I was talking to my son and at length about how everything happened and the decision and the injections and being with her and holding her. Anyway, when I was done, excuse me, when I was done, I said to Tom, you've heard all of how I treated this little kitten who's 16 years old. And my first fear, and I kept saying I didn't do enough for her. Well, I know better, but that's my fear of her not being with me. However, I said to Tom, Tom, you've seen and you've heard how I've treated Zippy during this time. And he said, yes. And I said, that's exactly how I want you to treat me when the time comes.
Good.
So,
Yes,
anyway,
yes.
It's hard to lose a pet like that.
Very
It's hard.
And I'm glad we know that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're very precious to us.
Yeah.
And it's very hard. Yes.
Yeah.
But they, you know, the thing that gives me comfort is I know that they're in a wonderful place.
Yeah.
Maybe they're going to come back as a human next time. I don't know. But, you know, there are earth angels that come here to help us, and they're just precious. Yes.
Yeah.
And I just am grateful for the ones I've had in my life. And yeah, it's very hard to lose them, but what a blessing to have them in our lives for as long as we have. You know, that's got to be grateful for that, because they are, like I say, angels for us.
Yeah, I feel for you, Joanne. I had to put down
Yes, I do too.
my cat of 20 years. I had her for 20 years, so I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
anyway,
Well, Sharon, I know you got something to say.
Well, there are two things. One is recalling July 2018, I think it was, when Zaya
Yeah.
was brought back to life twice after she had died, because the EMT's training was at all cost, revive the person. And I've had to rethink my final wishes, knowing that it really is out of our control in that type of situation. So we can plan as much as we want. It's similar to what the bank officer said to me. You can do the power of attorney, you can make all of these arrangements, but there will always be something that the deceased person did not think about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very grateful for the AEO trainings, but I wonder, what are we leaving out? Because it was so thorough, Laleen.
Yeah.
And the other thing is about the loneliness can happen right now because of being shunned or blocked out of somebody's life. And that is extremely painful. So Donna, I don't know how to ask the question. I wrestle with, what do you really do with that suffering? You know, it's not caused by you, but it is inflicted on you.
And that is something that the human being finds very difficult, because we need each other. We are here to help each other. And when we're ostracized like that, it is a big statement of you are not lovable. And it is a big statement, and it is a devastating statement. And if you know of anybody that's you know, maybe in that situation right now, I think that the best we can do is to go to that person and help them. I know there are religions who shun their people, and I don't know if anybody from the outside of that religion could ever help them. I think, you know, I don't know. But if you know of somebody, you know, I think it would be extremely helpful to them to go to them and try to help them understand that whatever someone else is doing does not make them unlovable. Because I think people can actually die of a broken heart when they don't feel loved. And I've seen that happen.
Maria Callas.
Pardon?
Maria Callas, the opera singer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She died
So
of a broken heart.
yeah. So I think, you know, the people that do the shunning, I don't know what we can do about that, but we can certainly help those that we know of anyway, you know, through that. And as people grow in their sense of empowerment, those kind of things will become less and less devastating to them, because they will start to learn who they truly are. And I think a lot of people, once they really understand that they do have power, they have power to create their own lives, then those things tend to not affect them as much. And again, that's a journey that shunning, I can't even begin to understand, because I've never been shunned that I'm, you know, that I'm aware of. You know, maybe I was and I didn't know it, but you know, it's something that we just have to help each other with. It's a toughie. It really is. And that's what causes a lot of the suicides for young people, especially. That and bullying, my goodness, bullying, and the young people who will take their lives because they can't handle not being loved, not being appreciated. And so, you know, I think one of our biggest, you know, contributions towards alleviating that is to, whenever possible, you know, help those people that you know are in that position. I think that could save lives. And I have stories I've even shared with you, I know, of people who were on their way home to take their lives when somebody showed some caring for them and it stopped them from doing that. So yeah, I think that's a big thing for us too. If we know that, let's step in and help if we can, you know.
Yeah.
Donna, I'm thinking of people that I personally know that have been shunned, and I cannot think of anyone, but I can think of a community of people who are shunned right there in Roseburg and other communities, and that's the homeless people.
Yes.
And that, I'm sure, is why they form their own communities. I certainly would not be comfortable walking into a homeless community by myself. So in a sense, that's shunning them. And it's just interesting to think about how community is needed, no matter how their living conditions may be terrible in our eyes, but still they have formed their own community, which apparently is their method of coping with being shunned.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and they form those communities for just that very reason. You know, people need to belong. It's innate in us, we need to belong. And I know that some people would be afraid to walk into a homeless, you know, community because they fear their safety. And I would never suggest that anyone do that. There are other ways to help. And I know when I opened Unity Church to the homeless during the winter months when it was cold, And it was amazing. The people were amazing. They were extremely strong given the circumstances they were in. All of them were very, very grateful that we were there, we were feeding them, we ate with them, we didn't ostracize ourselves, the people that were serving them, we ate with them. And I went home that night and cried to think that we can't find a place for those people. But I think that whenever you have a community that has been separated like that, homeless or Asians are having a problem now. I mean, all of these different communities, be them small, local, or, huge and global even, we don't understand those communities because the world has placed their judgmental attitudes about them. But I know when those homeless people came into that church, they were wonderful people. And, if you could just get to know these different people, you would realize that. And, but I can also understand not going into certain communities if you feel, that you're not safe, because you don't want to, that's not helping either. But many, many ways you can help otherwise. So, but yeah, it's usually that they're in that situation because people do not understand them or what's really going on.
I'd like to offer you another.
Real quick, Lily, before you start, can everybody see the chat?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing, I try to keep people in order in the chat. So if you don't have that open, if you could open that up. Go ahead, Lily. Sorry.
Me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sure. I wanted to offer up for you to think about the gay, lesbian, LGBTQ community is probably the most beautiful example that any of us can look at for how to deal with being the person who is being shunned. People get shunned because they're different, or because a church says you can't be queer and we're going to throw you out, or parents don't want a kid that didn't match whatever their belief in how that kid was going to turn out should be, or suddenly you find out your father is really wanting to be a woman, or your mother, whatever the reason. But it has nothing to do with the health of the person being shunned. Right. It has everything to do with how the other person is viewing their experience of that person, or maybe even a slight that person might have caused to them. Mm-hmm. But the answer is, or the question is, what is the response of the person who's been shunned? What can you do? And the only thing that you can really do first is grieve. Grieve and forgive and love. And understand that for whatever reason they have shunned you, it's theirs. It's not some horrible bad person that I am, or you are, or anyone else is. And it can't stop your life, your loving, your growth, your changes, your moving on in your life, or you'll die inside. And that's the lesson. I spent 40 years as a therapist working with gay and lesbian people, and that's the lesson they all go through, even if parents are accepting. Sometimes acceptance comes with a high price. Well, don't ever bring her home. Don't tell your grandmother. Don't tell anyone. It's our family secret. And, you can't live freely and live your own life that way. So whatever the circumstances are or might be, talk to somebody you can grieve with, and just, and who knows, what the future might hold.
And that's why we need each other, because someone who's sitting there all alone, being shunned for whatever reason, if they don't have someone to show them there's another way to look at this, and help them, they might, take their life or whatever, because they don't know. So that's why I keep saying we really need to take care of each other, help each other.
And you got to talk about it, because lots of parents have had problems with kids who, for whatever reason, are 13 or 18 or 26, suddenly, hey, the worst parent I've ever had, boom. And you're not alone in that. A lot of parents go through that.
Yeah.
Let's see. Who haven't we heard from? Martha or Anne Claire?
I'm good.
I'll just chime in here. I really enjoyed your sermon, Donna. I'm sorry I was a little late getting into the conversation. The biggest take for me was the rigidity of belief prevents growth. And we run into that all the time, everywhere. It runs our world. It runs our politics. It runs much of our life today. And we all have a lot of work to do to function and be accepting, understand what you believe, and try to help others see whatever, something new. And I like Michael's concept of looking through something with, depending on the prism that you look through it, because it really, it doesn't mean the same thing to everybody.
Yeah.
But
I grew up with God is love on the back of the church. So original sin just never occurred to me ever. And so, maybe I'm a bad person sometimes, but I don't.
You don't believe that?
No.
Say it.
But I mean, I don't, I don't wear a hair shirt, if that's what you're, and it's just never occurred to me that
right.
was guiding my life.
You bet.
And some people, it does guide their every step.
That's the first time we've ever had scolding in the
But that's not the first time that JC has scolded me in life.
That's right.
Yeah, right. Right.
Well, it takes willingness, just a little bit of willingness to see differently. Right. It also takes, because a lot of people are run by their subconscious and they don't even know it. Yeah. So, in fact, I started creating a class to help us figure out what's in there and get it out, because I think it's so important, because if we're being run by something we don't even know is there, I mean, how can you change it? So but even regardless if you don't have a class in that, it's just that willingness to just stop and allow another opinion or something to at least get in there and think about. And that's a first step to open up. Yeah.
Well, this has been an extraordinary discussion, and in some ways difficult, talking about death. And certainly one thing that we didn't really touch on was Passover, and that the origins of Passover being that we sacrifice the lamb, paint the blood on the door so that the spirit of death passes over us. And in this world where we're dominated by news of coronavirus, there is this very real tangible spirit of death, and we think about the sacrifices that we've made in order for that spirit of death to pass over our homes and our church. I think it's a very apt time of year to reflect on some of these difficult concepts that we've talked about over the last hour. Donna, I love this conversation. I think you brought a lot of wisdom into this room.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I love this conversation too. I love that every one of you is so willing to share and open up, because when we open up and communicate is when we learn and grow together. And I love that. So I appreciate each and every one of you for being willing to do that today. And it has been an awesome discussion. I really thought, well, this Easter, everybody's going to be gone. We'll have 2 or 3 people. Look at this. This is great.
No, you're playing to a packed house. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad that you got something out of
very much.
Sermon.
All right. Well, hey, dear beloved community, thank you for spending your Sunday morning / early afternoon with us. And I will look forward to seeing you all again next week.
Have a happy day.
Happy Passover.
Everybody.
Love you
Happy
all.
Easter.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.